Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, and I'm joined by Trent and Martel today. Plus, we have a very special guest joining the show. We have the legend from the Bally Sports Sun, Will Manso. Thanks for joining us today, Will.
My pleasure, guys. Good timing with playing playoffs coming up. So it's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. So the Miami Heat wrapped up the season with a 46-36 record, landing them in the 8th seed, and we're back for another round in the NBA play-in tournament versus the Philadelphia 76ers. We did receive some good news today and some bad news. The bad news is that Terry Rozier has been ruled out, but the good news is Duncan Robinson is listed as probable, and Kevin Love is also listed as available. So, Will, how are you feeling about this matchup? It seems like a must-win situation for Miami, and do you think we'll see playoff Jimmy show up in this game?
I mean, it's the question I think every Heat fan wants to know. And, you mentioned those injuries. I saw Kevin at practice today. He looked great, man. He had a sleeve on that arm, but he was shooting. He was moving. He looked comfortable. I think they dodged a bullet there. He's fine. Saw Duncan as well. I don't know how much he practiced today, but he was at the end of practice walking around. Seemed to be moving well, and he's probable. So I think you'll see him. And obviously they're hoping to get Terry back if they do make the playoffs by the weekend. But I think to your question on playoff Jimmy, it's what everybody wants to know, right? And I asked Spo today straight up, is it unfair that everybody kind of expects Jimmy to turn on this switch? Like, do you even expect it as a coach? And he said, look, Jimmy's one of our leaders and one of our stars, and him and Bam, we turn to them. They lead us. So however that leadership comes, whether it's Jimmy being playoff Jimmy and scoring 30, or Jimmy facilitating and playing great defense and being that kind of guy that draws the attention and gets the ball to others, it doesn't matter. The point is, the guys on that team are going to follow the leaders, and those leaders are Jimmy and Bam. You can call it playoff Jimmy if you want, but I think more importantly for Spoelstra and the Heat, it is following Jimmy's lead on how to go out there, attack Philly, and win that game.
Absolutely. So, Will, with all that being said, do you believe that playoff Jimmy still has another run? Do you think that this Miami Heat team has another run to make it, like, at least back to the Eastern Conference Finals? Especially like with Giannis probably not being there for the first round. Joel Embiid, he's banged up. Brunson, he's pretty much by himself with no OG and no Randall. So there is a way, but do you honestly think that this Miami Heat roster and Jimmy still have it left in the tank to make another run?
Martel, the thing with me is that I think they need to win tomorrow to have that run. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that as confident as we are all, whether you cover the Heat or you root for the Heat. I mean, we all love the Heat. We all want the Heat to win. That's why you guys do this, right? You want the Heat to win. I'm around the team all the time. On the broadcast, I love the Heat. I want them to win as well. But when you step back and you take off just the fan part of it, you don't want to play Boston in the first round. And I don't care how much success they've had against Boston in 2 of the last 4 years, and obviously last year winning a Game 7 in Boston, all the excitement of that. Having to start your postseason run by playing a 7-game series against Boston is brutal. And it's just the worst route possible to try to do that again. So that's why tomorrow is so important. Tomorrow's a game where if you win that, you mentioned the Knicks. Jalen Brunson's phenomenal. Josh Hart has been a double-double machine. They've got nice pieces. Dante DiVincenzo was hitting threes left and right. They've got a nice team, but you feel like you can beat that team in a 7-game series. And then after that, the crazy thing about this year is the East is kind of inverted. If you think about it, you mentioned the Bucks are banged up. You don't know what's going on with Giannis, Dame, what they're going to get. Is he going to be that Dame in the playoffs? If you look at that bracket, you got Cleveland and Orlando and then Indiana and Milwaukee. One of those 4 teams is going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, think about it, because they're all lining up to work their way down. The Heat, you're thinking, man, if we can just sneak through the beginning of this and somehow win, we got an opportunity to then potentially, whether it's play those teams, if we can beat, whether it's Boston or New York, you're in good position. So to answer your question, yes, I think they have a run, but man, it would help if they start with a win tomorrow.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Now, once again, I appreciate you coming on to the show. It means a lot. Shout out to you, Will. But also, I kind of want to go the other way, right? I think we're all rooting for the Miami Heat to win. I think there's a good chance that we do win and beat Philly and match up in New York. But what happens if, we lose this game? We do eventually get the AFC play Boston, get bounced out in the first round, and it's an early first round exit for this Miami Heat team, right? I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Jimmy Butler's contract is one of them. With him, I like to say load managing in the game, and, I really don't think he's worth that contract during the regular season and then in the
Yeah.
and in the postseason you start playing better basketball. I don't think that's fair because back-to-back years we've been playing teams, right? And then also, what do you think is going to happen after this season? Because it's year 5 with this big three. If you want to add Tyler to the big three with Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, is Tyler? Is that a possible trade? Do we extend Terry Rozier? Is he a part of the future, or do we just kind of you know what? It's time to just let it ride out with Jimmy's contract and go from there. What is the direction of this Miami Heat team?
It's a tough hypothetical because the
Yep.
reality is this. They have proven in the last 4 years, and I agree with you, with the load management, with the guys missing games, in particular Jimmy loading up for the playoffs, it's worked. I mean, they've gotten to 3 of the last 4 Eastern Conference, 2 NBA Finals in the last 4 years. They've accomplished what they wanted to do with that style. But the reality is if they're a one-and-done team this year, or let's say they lose in the play-in, and they lose tomorrow and then lose Friday, or losing that first round and losing 5, and it's not even close against Boston or whatever it may be, you have some serious questions. And you touched on some of them. It's hard to get into those hypotheticals now because we don't know what's going to happen in the course of this postseason. But under that hypothetical, I can't see a scenario where you just say, hey, let's run it back again. Running back an NBA Finals team is one thing. Running back a one-and-done team is another thing, especially when it's 5 years in. So I think the question is, the answer to your question is there's going to be some tough decisions. I think Terry Rozier, they love. I think he's part of the future. I think they're going to find a way to keep Terry. I know they love Tyler. But Tyler, again, he wasn't healthy this year. We're going to see what he does in these playoffs if he can take that next step. I know he's going into these playoffs with a massive chip on his shoulder, man. He really wants to prove in these moments. Last year during that run, he wasn't there. And while he enjoyed it for his teammates, he wants to be part of a run like that where he's a big part of it now. So I think there'll be questions there. And I think the biggest one is Jimmy. Do I see them trading Jimmy or moving on from Jimmy this offseason? I don't. But do I see a situation where they have to have that uncomfortable conversation because of the potential contract situation of hey, are we really going to give someone that kind of money after all these years? It's a tough conversation that may come, but we'll see the next couple of weeks, maybe even the next just week is really going to tell us a lot where that decision or where that could go.
So, okay, and I have a 2-part to that, right? So because you've seen Kevin Love and the team, warming up today and stuff like that. So how's the energy, the vibes in the practice? Are they going in confident? Are they obviously I want my team to be confident, but you can kind of feel energies and vibes during practice and stuff like that,
Yeah. Can I tell you something? So the one thing I told some people today, I saw some folks over at the Panthers game. I was over there earlier to do a story. I feel better today after seeing them than I did the other day at the end of the regular season, because there was a sense today where the page was turned. This year, after every game, it was always hey, man, are you guys figuring it out? Do you guys think you're turning the corner? Do you guys think you can get the regular season going? Are you going to be the 5 seed or the 7 seed? Do you have to deal with the play-in? Every day was the same storyline, right? That's it. It's over, man. The regular season's gone. That's it. Whatever you could say about the regular season, the blown opportunities, the inconsistencies, they're a playing team. But I almost think that there's a sense of calm now. We're okay, we don't have to deal with the crap and the questions and all that stuff. We're a playing team. That's a reality. And now we got to make the most of this reality. And there's a confidence. Talking to Caleb today, seeing Bam today, seeing Jimmy be the last guy off the court today working. These guys really feel maybe other teams around the league don't buy it, that they're that confident. This team's really confident that they're just going to go out there and they're going to win. And if they somehow lose tomorrow, they're going to win Friday. And if they win Friday, they're going to go to Boston and win a series. There's just that internal confidence. To answer your question, the vibe was the page has been turned, man. This is a playoff team. Whether you play in, playoff, doesn't matter. They're ready for what's next.
Yeah, so Will, my question for you is regarding the offense. And we know that's been our Achilles heel for the season. Defense has always been the Miami Heat's identity. And we were struggling with that in the midseason. We were, I think, in terms of defensive rating at one point, 13 or 14. But I think we finished the season top 5, which is great. Better than last year. We were number 9. Offense, we finished at 21 in terms of offensive rating. So bottom 10, bottom 3.
Felt worse sometimes too. Felt worse than 21 sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And I like to look at historical data when it comes to the NBA. And so I looked at the last 43 NBA champions. When we look at defensive rating, offensive rating, all of those champions basically were top 5 in either offense, defense, or both, with only 3 outliers in 43 seasons. And so one of the outliers was the 95 Rockets when Hakeem won, the 2006 Miami Heat, and the 2011 Mavs. So two of those involved the Heat.
Yeah.
So, but also when I looked at the offense, so a lot of these teams, like that Houston team, I believe, was really good at defense. They're like the top 4. But at worst, when I looked at all those 43 teams, if they weren't both top 5 in offense and defense, at worst they were like 13, 14, 15. Like we're at 21. Like, so I'm just curious. Like, I know you mentioned you think we could potentially make a deep run. And again, as long as we're getting healthy, which it seems like we are outside of Terry, do you think our offense is good enough to, again, propel us to possibly winning? Because we've been there 4 times now. We appreciate that. We don't want to take it for granted for what Jimmy has done in this build. It's been wonderful. But we want to win a ring. He deserves it. So do you think the offense is good enough to win it all?
Not the regular season offense, no. Not anything close to that. If they don't make a big jump and show the offense at the times they've shown with great movement, with great spacing, then no, they're not. This is not a championship offense when they play like that, even when they're middle of the pack offense. And I think their calling card being defense is if we could just get our offense into the higher half of the league, playing like a higher, like you said, 13, whatever. If you could play an offense that's middle of the pack or a little better and a top 5 defense, I think this team feels it can win championships. And I know the ultimate prize is the NBA championship. The West is tough. So you're probably going to have to play it. You're going to have to play at a top 10 offense pace to beat the West in the 7-game series. That's asking a lot. That's a big jump from where they were in the regular season. But to answer your question, when it comes to this particular, team, it's going to be a significant jump offensively for them to really have a chance to win the championship. Now, the East is broken. The East is a mess. Like, I know everybody talks about Boston. I still have my questions on Boston, but I think there's no question that they are the best team in the East right now, right? They're the team that everybody's going to be chasing. They won 60-something games. But the rest of the East is a mess. So you can't get to the NBA Finals and a chance to win that championship you're talking about without getting out of the East. That's why I say play your style, play your defense, try to find some sort of rhythm. Remember what happened last year in the playoffs? They reverted back somehow to being the Miami Heat 3-point shooting team that they were the year before, which was the best in the NBA, when they were one of the worst in the NBA in the regular season. So this core has shown the ability to flip a switch and change a narrative from regular season to playoffs. Amir, to do that again this year is their only chance to really make a run. If they don't do that, they're not getting maybe even past the first round with the way they played offense at times.
All right, so we know that we're going to be leaning heavy on Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, but who do you think on this roster can be that X factor going forward for the Miami Heat? Because, we're going to need guys to step up, when Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, maybe they might not be on that night, or maybe they're just doing everything they can. So who can alleviate some of the pressure off of our core players?
Well, the answer, if healthy, would be Rozier, but I don't know how healthy he's going to be anytime soon. That neck is pretty jacked up. Now, Spo has said it's one of those things where, you sleep funny on your neck when you have pain and you can't move. And then one day you wake up and you're like, wow, I feel great. They're treating it. They're trying to get him right. But right now, he's not right. He's not playing tomorrow. And I don't know if he's playing Friday if there's a playing game. I don't know if he's playing a game one Saturday or Sunday if they make the playoffs. It's that touch and go. So let's move Terry out to hopefully he gets healthy. To me, the answer is playoff Caleb because we saw it last year. Like, tomorrow, no. I think tomorrow the guy is Tyler. I think Tyler tomorrow I think the Sixers are going to do everything they can to get the ball in Jimmy's hands. I think Bam is going to be so focused on getting NB that it's going to be hard for him to really be a force on offense. I think for them to win tomorrow, it's got to be Tyler. But I think the big picture of the playoffs, the guy outside of that big three has got to be Caleb because he's the one guy in that rotation, in that group that has shown the ability to go out and play and finish. And he's such an attack of a great when he's doing those crazy moves to the basket and finishing strong and ones, these layups and throwing stuff up. And when his shot is falling, which it hasn't been consistently of late, I think he could be a difference maker. So I think, Martel, to answer your question, I think it really is going to be Caleb outside of the big three until hopefully Terry is back healthy and can be the guy we saw for the last month before he got hurt.
Now, with our two young guys, with Jaime and Jovic, who do you really think is really going to pop going forward? Because, don't get me wrong, Jovic really wasn't playing like in the beginning of the season, but he's really been beneficial and a great forward next to Bam Adebayo. And I know that like a lot of people said that Jaime Jaquez Jr. kind of hit the rookie wall, but, he's another Miami Heat guy. He's a warrior. So who do you think out of those two can really, help this Miami Heat team going forward?
I think they're going to need both. I think Nico initially probably more so because he's starting. And, you asked me a month ago if Nico was really going to start. I would have told you probably not, that they'll shift in another direction. But, man, I would be shocked if Nico doesn't start tomorrow. I mean, how can you not start him? I mean, he's played so well. And the thing about Nico is that when he wasn't playing well on offense, he was kind of finding his rhythm. He was rebounding. And then when he wasn't doing the offense, but he was rebounding, he started playing a little defense. And now he started figuring things out on offense. And now he's got all three things going. Like, he still needs work on defense. He's, 20 years old. He's a work in progress. And his shot still needs consistency. But, man, the way that he can run a fast break, the way that at his size can grab a rebound and go to the other side of the court and get the offense going, which Spo loves, I think Nico's going to be asked a lot. But I do think in second halves and in big moments, we forget that Jaime in the beginning of the season, there was the first month of the season, nobody in the NBA played more fourth quarter minutes than Jaime Jaquez. Nobody. Not rookies, any player. So I asked Jaime straight up today after practice, hey, do you feel like you're turning the corner again? And he's like, I've felt that way for 2 or 3 weeks now. I had that wall, I had the injury, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, I really feel like myself again. And I believe it. I think he turned that corner. And especially in second halves when you need a big rebound, a big play, a big shot, a big finish, I think Jaime is going to be ready for it the way he was in the first quarter of the season.
That's funny, Marcel. He was going to he answered my question about Jaime, but I can go another direction with this, Will, too, right? So, you talked about earlier about, this team possibly, not making out the first round if we match up Boston and early exit and stuff like that. There's a side of me that I hope that happens, and then there's another side of me I want to go to the finals, right? And the side of me that's saying I hope it happens is because I feel like every time we go to the finals, they're like, the front office is like, okay, let's just add a couple of pieces, like role players and, undrafted players that we're used to, and going with that. But do you think, with an early exit, like we look at some, the big names, even if we could afford them, if not, I know how the cap is looking right now. Like, if Donovan Mitchell is a real target, you know how the offseason with Dame Lillard and stuff like that, like, are those realistic names, or it's just like we can't afford it? We got to go with the people we have, at the moment, with free agency, trades, and stuff like that.
I think if there's a pivot in the organization, if they decide they got to, absolutely, it's possible. And I think, this offseason we saw there was only one reason Dame didn't happen. That's Joe Cronin. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, he just didn't want to trade him, and for whatever reason in his mind, he felt he could get a better package in the deal that they got with DeAndre Ayton and all those other guys, Robert Williams, and the draft picks. I mean, I thought it was a terrible deal when it happened. And I think now, an NBA regular season later, I think we can all agree it was a terrible deal. And who knows, maybe those draft picks in 28 and 29 turned out to be good players for Portland. But in the short term, it was a terrible deal. And I think in the midterm, it's a terrible deal. And I think eventually we'll see in the long term, it's a terrible deal. But to your question, yeah, I think the organization, the way I look at it with the Heat, they're never afraid to pivot. And I think the reason that we've seen this core now for 5 seasons is because of what we talked about earlier. They've gone to 3 of the last 4 Eastern Conference. They've gone to 2 of the last 4 NBA Finals. It's hard for a team to pivot that core when they've gotten so close and they feel that a tweak here or a tweak there can help. And the reality is this: they made a move for Terry Rozier that I loved. I love the move for Terry. But, man, this team just can't figure it out because they can't stay healthy. Right when they had about 72 hours where everything looked good, and then Duncan hurt his back, and then Terry hurt his neck. And they're like, damn, what happened? The full health is never going to happen, is it? It's just not going to happen. And they're starting to play without the full health. And like I said earlier, I don't know if Terry's going to be ready for the playoffs if they do make the playoffs. Duncan's back is not 100%, but he's close enough where he looks like he's going to play tomorrow. So these are all questions that as an organization, you got to sit there and sift through and say, okay, was it injuries? Was it poor play? Do we need to move? But I do think, to answer your question, and I think Heat fans are wondering, yeah, I think they'd pivot. I think they'd absolutely pivot if this doesn't work out. But I think in their mind, they think it is going to work out because of the track record.
Yeah, and then another thing, right? I'm not too sure if this is true, but I hearing this often. You know how the Miami Heat play kind of small ball at the 4, sometime before Jovic came in, Martin, Haywood, and it was always different lineups and stuff like that. Is there a kind of disconnect with Riley and Spo that Spo wants to play a different way and Riley's like has something involved in, like, he wants to go out there and play with a bigger 4? If you look at, the Boston Celtics, they're pretty lengthy tall, the Milwaukee Bucks, like, does Spo want to play kind of with the small ball? Obviously, Jovic is in there now, but it took us a while. Is there like kind of disconnect there, or you haven't really heard.
I wouldn't use the word disconnect. I think they all meet every day. Like even today, they were in that little round table. I call it the Heat Brain Trust, where it's him and Andy and Spo, Pat. They're all sitting there, Nick Harrison. They're all throwing ideas around in conversations. But in the end, there's one guy who has the say there, and that's Spo. He's going to set the rotation. He's going to figure it out. Now he's going to talk to Pat. He's going to use his guidance and his knowledge and things like that. But I think you have to remember with Spo loves position list. I mean, he basically invented position lists in the last 10 years of the NBA with the way things work and the things he did with the big three. Now you see it everywhere. Spo doesn't believe in position. Spo hates even saying like this guy's at the 4 because why? Because Nico can run it like a 1, and he can run a break and he can. You see Bam at the top of the key leading offense as a 5. These are all things that I think Spo hates to hear that because he knows that he's going to need guys to do multiple things. But I will say this. I think the one thing that they can take trust in, and Heat fans, but I think Pat Riley trusts in Spo, is that Spo's not afraid to ruffle feathers. He's not afraid. We've seen him right before playoff series make changes. During playoff season, make changes. During games, make changes. I mean, Spo will look, and whatever the matchup dictates, whether it is the Knicks or Celtics, hopefully they get in the playoffs and play one of those teams, you're going to see matchups be what Spo cares about. Not saying, well, this guy's a 4, and this guy's a 5, and this guy's a 1. No, if he's got to put Terry and Tyler together, and he's got to put Nico there, if he's got to move Nico out because he wants a little more athletic, a little more athleticism and quickness in Caleb at a certain spot at the 4, trust me, he will do it. He's not going to pigeonhole himself into one thing.
And for Caleb, Amir, you can go. Is this the last year for Caleb on Miami, do you think, or can we afford him?
No, I don't think so. I mean, no, I don't think they can afford him. I think they'll try to afford him.
Okay.
I don't know what the economics are going to be of the NBA this offseason because, every offseason is kind of different. Like, okay, our team's spending. What are they prioritizing? But, man, Caleb deserves money. And I know health for him, he really hurt his wrist pretty bad recently, and he's been playing through it, and he's gotten better and better. But Caleb, to me, showed it last year. He showed his flexibility. He's right in his prime. I think Caleb's going to do the smart thing and try to get paid. And it's going to be tough when we're saying that they want to keep Rozier and you got the core, Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler trying to figure out. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Caleb went out and got money this offseason, as he should, as a guy who's really earned that ability to go out and make some money.
Yeah, those are two factors that I like. One, Tyler, with his injury history, missing the playoffs last year, he has a chip on his shoulder. Caleb has to play for that contract because he's had a pretty good year, but he's been in and out of the lineup. He had 15 games missed, and so he's had a good. He's a role player. He's going to be inconsistent, but I think he's going to try really hard because obviously he's trying to play for that second real contract, essentially, right? Yep. So I think he will opt out, and we probably won't be able to afford him. But I have two quick ones for you before we close out. So going back to the game against Philly. So I saw on the injury report on the Philly side, Embiid's questionable, Melton's out, and a few others are questionable. So it looks like he's banged up. He's kind of re-aggravated that knee a couple times in the last few games. So hopefully Bam and Jovic can slow him down a little bit, kind of like how they did with Jokic, in that Denver game when he scored 12 points, even though he shot 5 for 8 in that game and was more playmaking.
Yeah.
He was more of a facilitator, so it's not like we held him to 2 for 15 or whatever, but we still slowed him down to a certain degree. So I'm hoping Bam and Jovic can hold down Embiid because he's banged up. So I think the primary focus perhaps is going to be around Maxey. We went 2-2 against the Sixers. 3 of the games he scored 30, 30, and 37 against us. So how do we slow him down? Do you think Jimmy's going to be focusing on him a bit here and there, or is Caleb going to be guarding the point of attack slash Maxey?
I think it'll be Caleb. I think it'll be H, and I even at some point it might be a little DeLon Wright. I think it's going to be they're going to throw bodies at him. I think they'll start with Caleb, and Caleb kind of talked about it today after practice. I think they'll start with Caleb and see how it goes. And if they got to throw H on him, because H is a pain, man, he'll be on you. We see what he can do defensively. And again, I think in certain spots they may throw, if they need a body, they'll throw DeLon Wright in there. I mean, they're going to throw him multiple looks. It's not going to be one thing. But I think those 3 guys in that order are going to get the initial attacks. Could there be spots where Jimmy's maybe on him? Sure. But I don't think that's going to be the game plan. No. And I think when you look at Embiid, Embiid is not the same, but he can still go out and get 35. That's how special he is. So I think it's going to be Bam is going to try to keep him away from the basket. And the Sixers, if you notice, since he's come back from injury, have kind of intentionally kept him away from the basket. It's not like the Embiid post-game finishing low. He's been settling a lot for the mid-range. Against the Heat the other day, he hit a few. He knocked down a couple threes as well. He's just an elite scorer. Sometimes you can't stop him. He's so big and so talented. But I think Bam will have that role. That three-headed monster I mentioned is going to kind of have the role on Maxey. And if you can just kind of minimize one of them a little bit, Kelly Oubre is a guy that's hurt the Heat with athleticism, but I think you can do enough to keep the game. I don't want to say in the mud because, again, I don't think the Heat winning a 96-95 game is the formula here, but you also don't want a 125, 122 game. So I think somewhere in the middle, I think that he can find a balance where they can find a way to keep it close and win in the fourth quarter.
Awesome. So last question for you. What's your prediction for the game?
And I'm not doing this because I'm a homer, and obviously I want the Heat to win. It wouldn't shock me if the Heat got blown out tomorrow. I mean, this is just the way this team is, man. They're weird. It wouldn't shock me if the Heat went into Philly and fell behind 22-8 and couldn't recover, made a late run in the fourth, but ended up losing by 10. Like, that's just the way this team is. But what I think we're going to get tomorrow is a mentally strong, playoff-tested team that will keep the game close in the fourth quarter. And in those clutch moments, I still have faith. I know everybody wants to hear playoff Jimmy, but I think tomorrow we're going to get a little playoff Tyler. I think Tyler's going to have to make some big shots in big spots in the fourth quarter, and I think he will. I think, again, he's got a chip on his shoulder to kind of set this off by saying, man, I wasn't here last year for it, but I'm sending us in like Max Strus did last year. I think Tyler's going to send them into the playoffs this year, and I think they find a way to win in Philly tomorrow and then start the series in New York this weekend.
I love it. I think we all want to win. I think we want to see the New York Knicks because, like you said earlier, they're all favorable matchups heading into that Eastern Conference Finals spot and stuff like that. So I love it.
Yeah, we'll see, guys. We'll learn soon enough. Less than 24 hours from now, we'll know exactly what's going on.
Yes, we will. Well, thank you so much, Will, for joining the podcast. We really appreciate your time. Do you want to plug anything to the audience before we hop off?
No, man. You guys can always find me on Twitter at Will Manso if you ever want to chat Heat. But meanwhile, keep up the good work, guys. Hopefully, if we can get a little run going, we'll do a little maybe Eastern Conference Finals preview at some point. That would be nice.
That'd be beautiful.
That'd be great. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate it, man.
Guys. You got it.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks,
guys.